How much debt is too much debt for law school? Like, when should you just not go to law school because it doesn't make sense financially? And when is it okay to take out some debt? For those of you who are new, my name is Sydney Montgomery. I'm the CEO of Montgomery Admissions Consulting, and we specialize in working with first generation and minority law school applicants. And today we are talking about debt. You guys know I keep it 100 with you all the time because I only know how to be one way. And debt is a sticky topic for me. It's always been something that I have had to navigate and move around. Um, I didn't come from a well-off family. In fact, both my parents, worked two jobs. I have always worked. I worked few jobs in college, like three jobs. I worked a couple jobs in law school. I personally feel attacked by my current student loan debt, but I would also do it again. And there are some reasons why, and that's kind of what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about debts, which people don't talk about. And certainly no one talked to me about when I was 18 or honestly 17, signing promissory notes for college. And then even 21, I just sign, whatever. Okay, let's pay for school. I had no idea about debt. I had no idea what was too much debt. I had no idea about good debt versus bad debt. I didn't know to shop interest rates. I really didn't know anything. And I think that sometimes there's a lot of shame when we think about debt and fear, right? So there's shame and there's fear. There's shame if you feel like you took out too much debt. And there's fear if you're trying to avoid debt at all costs. And those are both extremes that I want to deconstruct a little bit today, because sometimes I have, students that come to me and they say, I don't want to pay anything for law school. Totally possible, very admirable. Not always necessarily the first thing that should be on your mind. It really depends, and we're going to talk about it. But students will say, like, the most important thing to me is staying debt-free. I don't have any debt. I don't want any debt. Okay. We're going to talk about that, right? Because there are some things in the world that we live in America, you're going to have debt, right? Unless you're just big balling and you can pay cash for your house or cash for your car. At some point, you're going to have debt, and that doesn't necessarily mean that you should feel shame. It also doesn't mean that you're not going to be financially stable for the rest of your life. It doesn't mean that you're not going to be able to leave a legacy. Like, one of the big things for me is helping students break generational cycles of poverty and debt and create generational wealth. That's personally very important to me in my life, to have my children be able to not feel the pressure of not feeling financially stable, because that can cause a layer of stress that can actually really affect your health. Still speaking from experience, by the way. I'm just going to be real with you guys, right? Like, financial stress is very damaging to your health. And as someone who has I'm in a better place now with my relationship with money, but it's still kind of evolving and growing. But I will say that I used to have a really unhealthy, a really toxic relationship to money, to financial stress. It just became sort of what I centered a lot of decisions on, whether I thought I could afford it, whether I thought it would help me be in a better financial situation. And while that might seem prudent, like there's nothing wrong with that, right? It sometimes leads you to make decisions out of a scarcity mindset and not an abundance mindset. And it also sometimes creates more anxiety, right? It keeps you trapped in a cycle of anxiety. So I want to kind of deconstruct some of that a little bit. But, you don't necessarily want to make decisions out of fear, but you also don't want to feel shame, because sometimes you can use debt to your advantage. Sometimes there are ways to strategically use debt. And that's a conversation, especially in the Black community. We just don't have these conversations. We don't have more nuanced financial conversations. Honestly, we don't have financial conversations sometimes. We're just not talking about it. But when we do talk about it, I think there are ways that we can really dig a little deeper past the emotions and into a little bit more about how can we strategically position ourselves for financial wealth. So in this conversation of debt, we're going to touch on a few things. We are going to talk about how to evaluate your debt risk. What are some things personally that you need to think about as you are thinking about debt and debt management? And of course, as you're thinking about debt and debt management, it'll also help you figure out how much debt you personally can take on. We're going to talk about some resources. Shout out to Law School Transparency. They have some really great financial tools for you. It's totally free. I would definitely use it. They have a budget and a debt calculator that is really helpful as well. We're going to talk about when law school is not worth the debt, and when it is, and how much. We're also going to talk about how to understand your debt as it relates to your future career. And then we're going to talk about how to minimize your debt, because listen, everyone wins when you can minimize debt. So let me know. Also, let me know in the comments. Let me know, how are you feeling about debt, about money? I'm almost 28, and there's so much about this that I'm still learning and had to navigate on my own, right? Not having generations of people in my family be able to tell me how to navigate money, how to strategically position myself, even what offers make sense. So I feel like we need to be talking about this more. When we do talk about it, it's reactive and not proactive. You can never build generational wealth by always reacting to situations. That's just not how building works, right? You have to build by being proactive and by making these decisions. So how can we understand, first off, your own debt profile? And I have another video. I'll probably do an update video this year. I did a video last year that said, cost versus prestige. When do you choose the full ride, and when do you choose the, T3 school? And, sometimes you can't choose both. And then how do you make that decision? But when we're talking about what goes into some of even those calculations, we need to evaluate first our own debt profile, our own risk factors. What other debt do you have? So I went to Princeton, loved Princeton. I'm obsessed with my school, y'all. Princeton generally does, debt-free, people don't get loans, all that good stuff. My parents could not afford to pay the financial contribution that they were supposed to pay, which was pretty modest at the time. My parents were getting a divorce. It just wasn't a good time in our household. So I took out loans to borrow for the parent contribution. So I graduated with, I think, around $30,000 of debt. Princeton would probably roll over in their grave if they heard that. They're like, this is not supposed to be how it is. But this is real life, right? My parents could not pay, right? So it was the most affordable school that I got into. We only really had to pay $5,000 or $7,000 a year, which is, still substantial, but considering the other schools, it was the most affordable school that I got into. I'm so grateful for the amount of grant money that I did get, but I did graduate with undergraduate debt. If you also graduated with undergraduate debt, you don't have to tell me, but just talk to yourself, find out for yourself, how much undergraduate debt do you still have to pay? And what kinds of loans are they? Are they low interest? Are they high interest? Are they predatory? Are they Perkins loans back in the day before they canceled that program? Are they in your parents' name? Are they really Parent Plus loans that you're paying them? What does your undergraduate debt profile look like? And this is important because for me, so I chose Harvard for a number of reasons, but also because of their loan repayment assistance program. And I do have another video on LRAP programs. I'll be talking a lot about that in the spring. But Harvard's loan repayment assistance program rolled in up to $50,000 of undergraduate debt, which means that Harvard was sending me a check twice a year. And part of that check went to cover my Princeton loans. So thankfully, my Princeton loans are actually almost paid off. Shout out to Harvard. Thank you very much. But that was important to me because I knew that coming into a debt conversation, I wasn't just thinking about my law school debt, which is most of my debt, but I was also thinking about my undergraduate debt, baby, that had to be taken care of and eliminated and eradicated, right? I needed to figure out a solution that would work both things. If you are a person who took out a lot of undergraduate debt, if you took out $100,000, please tell me you didn't take out $100,000 of undergraduate debt because I would just pass out right here. But if you took out a good amount of undergraduate debt, you want to be more cautious with your law school debt, because you don't want your total debt, right, to be so overwhelming. So, this past year I went through the process of trying to qualify to buy a house. Spoiler alert, did not qualify to buy a house. Little salty about that. It's okay. But a large part of it was the student loan debt. And because I'm self-employed and this country treats self-employed people like trash. But another video, another day. The fact of the matter is they didn't ask, oh, well, this is undergraduate debt and this is law school debt. They said your student loan debt is X, right? So you want to make sure that that total number stays manageable. So you want to take that into consideration. Now, some of you guys have a lot of credit card debt. I thank God I've been delivered from that. Your deliverance is coming if you haven't yet been delivered from that. Some of you might have other, maybe you have child support payments or alimony payments you're making, or maybe back taxes, or kind of whatever it is. You want to figure out, what is my debt risk going into this large purchase that I have? I did a video on what it means to, like, how do you pay your bills? Like, what does that student allowance look like? How do you pay for things, right? If you get financial aid or you get a loan, it will cover your tuition, and it will cover also those personal expenses. And that personal expense amount, that's your housing, that's your food, that's your other bills. So you want to make sure that if you're paying a ton of money into credit card debt or other things, then you really don't want to take out a lot of money for law school loans, because even though all of your loans will be deferred while you're in law school, you're not able to save any of that money. And, you want to make sure that when you graduate law school, ideally, you only want to have student loan debt, or maybe car debt, or maybe a mortgage, right? You don't want to also be trying to pay down credit cards and pay all these other things off while you're trying to pay your loans. So you want to look at, like, okay, 3 years from now or 4 years from now, am I in a position where my money that I'm making can go towards my student loan debt? Or do I also have all of these other high interest rate loans and obligations that I'm also going to be trying to pay while paying my loans? Because if you have those things, again, you want to try to minimize the amount of law school debt that you have and that you're taking out. So, as we're kind of talking about evaluating your risk, your debt risk, there are just some kind of basic, kind of almost bright line rules here for when things don't make sense. So this is my second plug for Law School Transparency. Shout out to them. What I love about the school profiles that they have is that it actually can show you the median salary at certain schools. It can show you how much a student from a certain school might make, whether it's 50,000, 100,000, 190,000, that kind of thing. I want to kind of show you guys, or tell you guys, where you can go. So if you go on Law School Transparency, you will actually be able to see the employment score for a certain school. You'll be able to see jobs, admissions, and most importantly, salaries. Now, if the median salary for a school is $50,000, it does not make sense for you to take out $200,000 worth of debt for that school. I don't even care what your debt risk is. You could have no other debt. That doesn't make sense. That is not, you do not need to do that. Okay, I'm gonna say it again. If the median salary is $50,000 coming out of law school, because all of y'all think, oh, I'm going to go to law school and I'm going to make $200K. Just this morning, actually, one of the law firms just upped their starting salary to $215 at that top level, right? Okay, so yeah, at some law firms, you'll make a ton of money. But not all of you are going to big law. Some of you might just be your, friendly neighborhood divorce lawyer. I was a divorce attorney. Ain't nothing wrong with that. I did not make $215,000, okay? I made $65,000. So if the median salary, though, if across the board at that school, it's $50,000, you do not want to take out $200,000 of debt. If the median salary is $180,000, you still really don't want to ever take out $200,000 of debt. Like, that's just really not a good decision. But that is not as foolish. a decision, because you actually have the ability to maybe at some point in your lifetime get out of debt. Now, one of the things that Harvard had us do, which I actually really appreciated, is if you're on the loan repayment assistance program, where they're giving you a check every twice a year, which is different from a loan forgiveness program. In a loan forgiveness program, you are paying all of your loans, and at some point in time, they forgive it. In a loan repayment assistance program, they are sending you money periodically to actually help you pay your loans. But at that point, our loans were put on a 10-year plan. And I actually really appreciated that. Even though I'm not currently in that program, I've kept my loans on that 10-year plan because I need to be out of this debt by the time I'm 34. All right? Like, I graduated law school when I was 24. I said, listen, by the time I'm 34, we are going to be done with the student loan situation. And that's just a promise I made to myself. But you want to make sure that you are setting yourself up in a way that you can get out of debt in a reasonable amount of time. I think 10 years is a reasonable amount of time, especially with interest rates. So it does not make sense to take out $150,000, $200,000. First off, none of you guys should really be paying sticker to go to law school. Now, the schools with the top 3, they only give need-based aid. So if you don't get any aid and you're paying sticker, it's because they've decided that you got it like that. Otherwise, you should be getting, I don't care if it's $10,000 or $15,000 a year. Like, you really shouldn't be paying sticker to go to law school. That doesn't make sense. There are just too many options for that. What that means is that I feel like you are stretching a little bit too much in a way that might not make financial sense, unless you are financially set and you said, listen, we're paying sticker, but my parents have $150,000 and a 529. I mean, you do you, boo. Goals, right? But if your parents don't have $150,000 and a 529 just sitting there ready for you to go to grad school, there's no reason for you to be paying full sticker to go to law school. But on the other end of that spectrum, where people are like, I don't want to pay anything for law school, I don't want to take out any debt, there's sometimes when it makes sense. All right, so I took out debt for law school. Obviously, I'm here talking to you right now about my debt. I also got grants, though. I did not pay sticker for Harvard. And they also paid me twice a year, right? But it was a reasonable consideration. Some of you want to go to big law. And there's no shame in that. I mean, I have lots of friends in big law. 85% of Harvard goes to big law, right? I just told you the starting salaries, one firm just went up to $215,000 today. Before that, last year, they kind of settled around $205,000. If you are going to a top school, you're going to a T14 school, a T25 school, and you know you want to go to big law, you should not be so cautious where you're like, I'm not going to pay anything to go to law school. Because more or less, you're going to be able to get out of, now again, don't pay sticker, but you're going to be able to get out of your debt within, 3 to 7 years or something like that. A lot of my friends actually are able to save a lot of the money that they're making. A lot of my friends at this point are almost done with their student loans. That's fantastic, right? At least most of them are at least halfway done. And so that's a consideration that makes sense. When your salary is really high, 180, 200, 205, and maybe in total you're going to take out, let's call it $75,000. That makes a lot of sense. Go to the best school that you get into that fits you, not just best school rankings, but best fit, best emotional fit, best programmatic fit, all of those good things. Don't be afraid. It's $75,000, like not a year total. So if it's, whatever that, $25,000 a year, if you have to take $25K out a year in loans, but you want to go to big law, you're going to be a high earner, and you're going to have good employment security because the school has a strong employment score, I don't think that's something you should be afraid to do. And that is really important because people get like that. They're like, I just can't take out any debt. And I'm like, but the blessings, they're here. Like 5 years from now, 10 years from now, you're going to be really, really happy with your Columbia Law degree. You're going to be really, really happy with the decisions that you've made and the employment opportunities that you've had. And you're going to be really happy that you took on that debt that you have now paid off because it made sense. So I'm not saying always it makes sense to go to Harvard or Columbia or Stanford or Yale or any of those schools. That's not what I'm saying. But I'm saying depending on the earning that you foresee, right, that kind of goes into like how your career goals affect your debt. This is also why one of my very big tenets is like, know why you want to go to law school. I know a lot of people say, I'll just figure it out when I go to law school. There are so many decision points that you need to think about before you even get to law school, before you even apply to law school. It helps you with your essays. But this is one of those. If you know what kind of lawyer you want to be, you're able to make better decisions on the front end, right? So if you know you want to go into big law and you're going to a school that has the ability pretty easily to get you into a big law that has that kind of salary, you can make different decisions with your debt. If you know, like me, that you're not going to big law, but you know you're going to do something, like I knew I was going to do family law. That's what I did. I also knew that family law wasn't always public interest. So for me, I was looking for programs that had really strong loan repayment assistance programs, and I knew that Harvard would help me on an income-based payment. And that is why I was comfortable taking out debt, right? Because it made sense. First off, I didn't pay sticker. I got a grant. I was on max financial aid. I also got financial aid in terms of the loan repayment assistance on the back end. I knew that employment-wise, I would be fine. God forbid if something happened and I like really needed to, I would just go back to practicing law. Somebody will hire me. And I enjoyed law school, right? So I knew that I had some security there, and that made me comfortable with taking out debt. But if you are not going to a school that has a loan repayment assistance program, right? If you are not going to a school that has a strong employment score or the ability to help you be a high earner, and you're looking at a median salary that's not very high, you don't want to take out a lot of debt. If you told me I would really very much like to be a family law attorney in upstate New York. Shout out to family law attorneys. We're just out here doing the Lord's work. And my LSAT score, it's not so high. We're going to be just real. Can we just have a real moment here? Like some of you are not good candidates for the top 25, right? And so those are the schools that usually have the more robust loan repayment assistance programs. So if you're saying, listen, my LSAT score is not so high, I am not going to get into a school that has a lot of money for loan repayment assistance programs. I don't want to work in big law, or I'm probably not going to be able to work at those top firms, or I want to do family law. And so I want to live in the suburbs. My salary is going to be pretty modest. Then in this process, you need to be maximizing your scholarship opportunities and minimizing your debt as much as possible. Because it will not make sense financially for you to take out even $100,000 total of debt for law school. It won't make sense because you will be paying that forever and you will feel shackled by it and resent it. You will resent it. You will resent not having the freedom to do what you want to do. Right? And so this conversation of how much debt is too much debt or not enough debt or when can I take out debt, you have to know where you're going and you have to know where you've come from. You have to understand what your financial landscape looks like up till this moment and what you can project your career trajectory and your salary and your income to look 5 years down the line. Those are two very crucial pieces of information that you need in order to appropriately assess what makes sense. Will I be able to pay this off? And honestly, like the government is really shaky. So I don't love, I trust the school. Listen, Harvard will have money. The government could just collapse and Harvard will still have an endowment. Like I know that if I go into a loan repayment assistance program with Harvard, like these people will write me a check. They will have the money. The government says they will cancel my loans. Maybe they will, maybe they won't. Maybe we get a new president. Maybe he doesn't. I don't know, right? Like there's just so many things. My personal faith. Now, you might have more faith in the government than I do, and that's good. Optimism is good. I don't have that kind of faith. So I would trust a well-endowed school to keep their word more than the government. Because, honestly, that's how schools keep money, right? And so I think that, you have to think about those considerations too when you're thinking about where am I going, what's my long-term plan, who am I putting my faith and trust into? But it is okay to take out some debt in order to strategically position yourself to have a higher opportunity, to have open doors. And I think especially, again, I'm just going to speak to my people for a second, right? Black people, sometimes we really only look at cost. And that's it. We're just like the cheapest school. You're going to go to the cheapest school. But like the cheapest school might end you somewhere where you have a lower salary than if you had taken out maybe even $10,000 more debt a year, but your starting salary is $50,000 more than it would have been. That, right? Math be mathing. So like you have to make the math make sense. You might need to take out a little bit more now for a lot more gains and opportunities, because there's an opportunity cost too, right? We have to work twice as hard to get half as much sometimes. And so like, the black tax, right? Like think about that when you're thinking about how much things are going to cost you, right? There's the cost of going to a school, what you're paying, and then there's the cost of going to a school, like what you're going to be able to do as a person in this, moving through this. And for me as a woman of color, right, like there's so many other considerations when I think about upward mobility and creating generational wealth and, wealth building, right? So I want you to think about that as well. Now, the last thing that I want to kind of touch on is minimizing your debt. And don't worry, we're going to have many more conversations about finances. 2022 is the year of me talking to you guys about your finances, because I'm just tired of us just not knowing these things. I'm tired of us not having these conversations. So let me know in the comments what your questions are. I want this to be a place where we can just talk about money and law school. And as someone who's left the law, right, also super happy to talk to you guys about that. But I think that there are all of these messaging too, especially as women, that we get about, oh, women are bad with money. Women don't make good career decisions. Women don't make good financial decisions. All of these things that I have kind of had to deconstruct in my own life to feel confident about the financial decisions that we're making. And I think that for a lot of us, we just don't feel confident. Like there are a lot of numbers. It costs a lot of money. It's more money than we've ever seen. It's more money than we've ever seen in a banking account. And trying to navigate this seems overwhelming. I know it did for me. And so I kind of want to have more conversations where we deconstruct this. But how can you minimize your debt? So of course there's the obvious, right? Like a lot of merit scholarship goes towards higher LSAT scores and GPA. And so, right, that's kind of like the one obvious, but that's not attainable for everyone. There are other ways that you can kind of minimize your debt. Outside scholarships is very important. It's so important. We have a blog that went out a couple of weeks ago on pipeline programs and scholarships for law school. I have a video on outside scholarships for law school. I want you to be hustling for yourself. No one is going to advocate for you and get you as much money as you. And even if it seems like, oh, it's just $1,000, oh, it's just $500, it can add up. If you're still in college, or honestly, if you just haven't gone to law school yet, even if you're in law school, did y'all know that you could start a 529 for yourself in some states? Because I started a 529 for myself. And if you don't make a lot of money, some states will match that. Shout out to the state of Maryland. They gave me $500 matching for my first contribution when I made my first 529 contribution a couple years ago, right? Because I just didn't make a lot of money. I think it was like under $100,000, but don't quote me on that. And then you can use that money for yourself for your educational expenses. Now, every state is different. Some states don't be letting you do that, so check with your state, but that is a really good way, right? And then, you can even like create like a little savings account for yourself. Listen, college students, be listening to this. You get $500, as a refund check, or you get $50 from grandma. Put it in that account, right? Start building that money up a little by little. And let's say you end up getting that full ride to law school, because I can hear y'all now. But what do? Save it for your kids. Listen, you start now. By the time you have kids, you'll have so much money in there. It's going to be great. It's going to be lit. It's the best decision you're going to make for your unborn child. Or your adopted child, right? So there are a lot of cool things that you can do there. 529 accounts can be transferred to you can transfer it to anyone that's related to you. So you can give it to your sister or your brother, or let's say your brother gets a full ride to college. Hey, mom and dad, can we transfer this for my law school? I mean, these are just conversations we can have. And so those are things that you can be thinking of. You should be applying to fellowship programs and pipeline programs. SEO Law Fellows is a really great one for those of you who have already applied to law school this cycle and have gotten in or are waiting to get in. SEO Law Fellows is a really, really great program. I know the Sidley Pipeline program, I think their application just closed, but there's a number of them on my website. We also, if you go to the bottom, the footer, this says LSAT scholarships. We have a list of some scholarships for your LSAT, but also scholarships just for pipeline programs and other aspiring students. There are a lot of schools that have scholarships for current or continuing students. So I want you to look at that, right? Sometimes it's not always like I have to get all the money for my 1L year. Sometimes when you're in your first year, you can get money, which is really good. You can, work and kind of reduce some of your debt overhead that way. You don't have to take out the full amount of that personal expense. And that's something I talked about in another video, right? You can reduce your debt by just not taking out the full amount. I had no idea that I could do that. Like that. Nobody presented that as an option to me. They were like, oh, Sydney, this is the cost, but if you would like, you can take out less. Like 0 people told me that. So I want to make sure that I'm always telling you guys that, because I probably could have taken out a little less. That's a really important thing as well. But, the main thing that I want you guys to do is engage in the conversation of debt. Don't just be scared of it. Don't just be anxious. Don't just, I don't want any. Or, well, I'm just going to have to take it out because, this is what we're going to have to do. That was me, by the way. I just was like, well, whatever. I mean, it's future Sydney's problem. Don't be like me. Engage with the conversation. If you don't understand something, ask. I signed so many promissory notes. I had no idea what they were saying. None. Ask. You have a right to understand what you're signing. You should. You're going to be an attorney. You have a right to understand your finances. There's a lot of banks that will do kind of free money coaching. I think Chase or Capital One used to do that. Call your financial advisor. Don't be embarrassed. I don't care if they have to explain it to you 5 times. Have them explain it to you 5 times. It's so much more important that you understand the situation. And honestly, there are a lot of companies that do free financial planning for young millennials. So shout out to Northwestern Mutual. It's my financial planner. I have paid $0 and 0 cents the last 4 years. It's because, if I were to buy a product, they would get a commission. I don't really care. I'm okay with that because it's free. It's free for me, y'all. It's free. A lot of these banks and companies want young millennials to get financial planning, which they will offer at no cost, so that you can get relationship with that company. But what that means is that you have someone that you can personally ask, hey, these are my finances. This is my debt. This is my monthly income. I'm going to show you all of the dirty. How much money can I afford to take out for law school? Get someone that you can ask that question to, because you will feel so much more powerful, right? You're not just guessing. They're not just big numbers in the air. You'll actually have someone to say, oh, well, if you plan to make this, you can even ask them, can you model that for me? Can you model what it looks like if I have a salary of $90,000? This is my student loan at this percentage, and these are my other bills. Can you model what my monthly payments look like and how much money I have left over? You will feel so empowered. And some of you might be listening and kind of hyperventilating because maybe I've already lost you, and I want to empower you to just rewatch this again. And even if you're feeling like I'm so overwhelmed by this conversation, go call someone. Listen, we will connect you with a financial planner. Get someone to break it down for you, because I always like to say in life, it doesn't really matter what it is. Our worst case scenario is so much bigger in our head when we don't engage with it. But when we actually say, okay, let's really look at it, it just doesn't seem so scary anymore. It doesn't seem so big, right? And so that's what I want to encourage you guys to do a little bit. A reminder that we are taking applications to work with us for the 2022 to 2023 application cycle. We are about to do a big thing, a new thing, with our blogs and having more videos. Like I said, I want to have a lot more financial conversations with you guys. So please let me know. Let me know what questions you have. You can always submit questions to be answered for free at bit.ly/breakintolawschool. But I think these are important conversations for us to have. So guys, I just want to say I believe in you. I'm excited for you. I'm excited for your future, but I'm excited for your financial freedom. If this video was helpful for you, of course, you already know, like and subscribe. If you're listening to the podcast, rate and review, share the podcast, share the video, and let me know what other financial topics do you want to cover this year. I am so excited for you. I'm here for you. If you need me, don't hesitate to reach out, and I will see you guys very soon.